by advocating for Africa's priorities under the African Union Agenda 2063, influencing the reform of the global multilateral architecture and advancing the agenda of the South in the North-South Dialogue Platform. Many of you will recall that there was court action that was launched by the UDM and others with respect to the issue of load shedding, as well as issues around the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. The United Democratic Movement and its co-applicants, which include NUMSA and Build One South Africa, amongst others, took government to court on an urgent basis on an issue that required government to coordinate numerous department responses in relation to the very complex matter of load shedding. This legal challenge also questioned the lawfulness and constitutionality of the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan. This process to coordinate government's response required government to spend a great deal of energy, time, and money to respond in detail, as it always does on any matter that is before the courts. This process has cost taxpayers money and to some extent taken attention away from the urgent related issues to which government has to attend to operationally. The UDM, Building One South Africa, NUMSA, as well as others, made government spend public funds and time on this gathering of information before suddenly withdrawing the application. Government always approaches such matters with a view that it is not only responding to the applicants, but it is responding to the public while attending to the underlying issues in the normal course of the administration. Therefore, for all these applicants to take up time and taxpayers' money to then simply walk away because they finally appreciated the detailed, substantive, and indisputable response submitted by government is in fact an insult to both the court as well as the South African public. In particular, the EM is well represented in Parliament, where government continuously accounts to elected representatives of the people in the work in progress and challenges faced. Okay, colleagues, I'll take questions. I have received some questions already on WhatsApp. While you're mulling over your questions, maybe I can just quickly deal with a question from one of your guys, Christian, from Network 24, who asked that now that Advocate Mkhwebane has been removed as PP, what benefits will she lose? He goes on to ask for a detailed breakdown of these benefits. And the last question that Christian asks is, will Advocate Mkhwebane be receiving a golden handshake, and what will this entail? So this is the matter that we believe the National Assembly is best placed to handle. Insofar as the President is concerned, the President has fulfilled his constitutional obligations on this matter. Other matters going forward will then be dealt by the National Assembly. Okay. See, there's a reluctant hand over there. Yes. Is that Junior? Oh, yes. How are you?
I'm
good. Good.
On this particular matter of the public protector, I
yes.
understand that the National Assembly has to respond to it. But from the perspective of the head of state, the president, who has to finally appoint the public protector after all the parliamentary processes are concluded, then he has to communicate the official decision to remove him. How difficult was this for the president himself, considering the fact that this is the very first public protector who had to be removed from her position?
This is an issue, or let me put it this way, this is a process that's well guided by the Constitution. in terms of steps that have to be undertaken to effect the removal of the public protector from office. It's not a matter that the president or anybody can conduct themselves arbitrarily. The Constitution lays out very clear steps that have to be undertaken, and the president has followed those, or has strictly followed those guidelines and stipulations from the Constitution. So I think we should look at it that way. Is it something that one will take delight from? Of course not. The Office of the Public Protector is a very important institution of our democracy. The expectation is that that institution is properly led, and the expectation is that that institution is able to dispense with its mandate properly, without any form of disturbance or without any form of interference. Parliament, or the Section 194 Committee, concluded that Advocate Magwenya had misconducted herself and that she was incompetent. And in that regard, the President, as I said, is guided by the Constitution in terms of his actions and how he acts. It's not an issue of emotions. It's an issue of what is stipulated in the Constitution and ensuring that those prescripts of our Constitution are followed in a manner that they are laid out. Yes, sir.
Telemark from Task News Agency. Vincent, about the visit of President to the United Nations, will there be the priority of South Africa to raise the question of immediate reform of the Security Council and the entry of African Security Council?
South Africa has been advocating for the reform of the United Nations Security Council for quite some time. It is an issue that's along the lines of the reform of the global multilateral architecture, which I've alluded to. And so that issue will always be front and center for South Africa in its engagements at the United Nations and beyond. It's an issue that President Ramaphosa always raises when engaging permanent members of the Security Council. As you will recall, it's an issue also that found expression in the BRICS Summit Declaration. And as you know, the BRICS group of countries includes 2 permanent members of the Security Council who also agree that there must be some reform of the United Nations Security Council, and that the Council must reflect sort of broader parts of our global population. So yes, it will be an issue that President Ramaphosa will continue to advance. Linked to that, we are deeply encouraged with what happened at the G20 with respect to the inclusion of the African Union as a member of the G20. And indeed, the President sees that step as the beginning of the many steps that have to follow with respect to the reform of the global multilateral financial institutions, for example, as well as the reforms relating to the United Nations Security Council. Sure.
Zimbabwe again from Newsroom Africa. On the issue of Zimbabwe, is President Ramaphosa in any way completely satisfied with the outcomes of the elections there, and are there any engagements between SADC countries in regards to the outcomes of those elections?
There is a process that's currently underway, which is led by SADC through the SADC Observer Mission that was dispatched to monitor the elections in Zimbabwe. A report is being compiled for the benefit of SADC heads of states. There have been preliminary reports that have been issued on the elections in Zimbabwe, notwithstanding some of the teething problems and issues that impacted the elections. Generally, there was satisfaction that this time around, for example, there were less incidents of violence in the build-up to those elections. You must have seen that Mr. Chamisa has decided to abandon his court challenge to those elections, which talks to the president's desire for parties to look at the issues in the country and to then approach those issues in a manner that is constructive, in a manner that is peaceful, in a manner that will ensure, both in the short term and long term, the stability of Zimbabwe and ultimately the recovery of Zimbabwe's economy. And so, to the extent that you have all of those processes underway, the president has no major concerns, because the issues that have been identified are issues that he believes the parties will attend to, are issues that he believes that the government of Zimbabwe will also attend to going forward, to ensure that you see significant improvement between the recent elections and the next round of elections. Stembele does not have a question. Go for it. Sure.
On the issue of Eskom, Mr. Magwenya.
Sorry, on the issue of?
Eskom.
Eskom, yes.
There were allegations made by the former Group CEO, Andre Director, in regards to, or who was alleging that there are cabinet ministers who are involved in some cartels at Eskom. I just want to check if there's any information that has been forwarded to the president as the person responsible for cabinet ministers in regards to those allegations, and has the president done anything to verify or to probe whether there's accuracy in those allegations?
Indeed, there were those allegations made by Mr. Director, but to the best of my recollection, Mr. Director has not provided any substantiation to those allegations, either to the law enforcement agencies or any other concerned authority in this regard. And so it's difficult to imagine who will the president be looking at or acting against in the absence of any information that is provided, information of which will go beyond allegations, but information that will be more substantive and be more informative to then trigger a course of action in the form of investigations, etc. So that remains a very difficult issue, because all we have in the public domain are wild allegations about potentially cabinet ministers being involved, but the president does not have names, or nor does he have the details of those allegations with respect to the nature of transgressions that those ministers will have purportedly done. So it remains an open-ended issue of allegations that remain to be substantiated and then properly tested through the relevant and appropriate investigations. Gert?
Vincent, thanks for giving me the opportunity. The financial crisis that was headline news over the weekend, and there has been some talks with the President involved as well. Is there any progress in that regard?
Is there what, sorry?
Any progress?
So maybe let's just get our terminology right here, right? South Africa has a fiscal pressure we don't have a financial crisis. So, and let's be cautious with the kind of words we use. And that fiscal pressure that the country is facing is not new. It's been something that's been openly communicated. It's something that government is seized with. You will have seen a letter that came out of National Treasury directed at all government departments with respect to the curtailment of cost. There's an exercise already underway, including here in the presidency, by the way, to look at our various cost structures and look at how we curtail those costs back. What I must also dispel with was the reporting that seek to characterize the engagement between the President and National Treasury as a secret meeting. That was unfortunately lazy reporting that sought to generate these sensational headlines. You cannot have a head of state meeting a key element of his administration, or any element of the state for that matter, be characterized as secret. The discussions may be confidential for reasons that those discussions are not yet ready for public consumption, but that does not equate to a secret meeting, especially when such a meeting is being held in a publicly accessible place. So that characterization of that meeting was rather unfortunate, and in my view, with all due respect, constitutes an element of lazy reporting and unnecessary sensation. What that meeting was seized about, as we've communicated, was one, to look at the sort of fiscal challenges that we are faced with as a country, but also then to look at measures to stimulate growth, because the fiscal challenges we are facing is partly rooted to low growth, which has resulted in low tax collections. And therefore it's necessary and quite prudent for the government to then look at the curtailment of cost, but equally continue to be seized with how do we stimulate growth. You will recall, Gert, that we have NICOM that is addressing our energy challenges, which the President has described as one of the biggest constraints to economic growth. That process is underway. Minister Ramaphosa every week updates the nation on progress in that regard. We've established the National Logistics Committee together with stakeholders in the industry. We've also established work streams, working closely with business, and those work streams are actually pillared around energy, logistics, and resolving related issues with respect to our ports, as well as the fight against crime and corruption. And so, as we are managing or navigating through these fiscal pressures, we are equally putting double or triple the effort, if you like, to ensuring that we resolve these issues that are undermining growth and we continue to attract investments. I mentioned in my opening that the President will be meeting or leading a roundtable discussion with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as well as the U.S. Africa Business Center. Really, the purpose of that roundtable is to continue showcasing South Africa's competitiveness, the opportunities that arise out of some of the challenges that we are facing, opportunities of which are quite ripe for investments, and to provide assurance that government is on the driving seat with respect to the resolution of these challenges, and also to provide assurance that we are on the driving seat with respect to managing this fiscal challenge, and we are keeping a close eye on our public debt levels, which we have admitted that are untenable. And so all of those issues are being attended to with a great deal of urgency and speed that they require, but we must just be cautious with how we term the exercise. It's not a crisis. It's a pressure. It's a pressure point that's being appropriately managed.
I take your point.
Sure.
The other thing I want to ask you, the cost that the court challenge from the UDM brought about, is there, can you name the cost? Tell us what it costs.
I can go back to the legal team to look at the aggregation of those costs. I think what we were seeking to communicate in this regard is that it's deeply disturbing when parties or individuals institute court actions that are over very complex matters that require a great deal of resources to be mobilized to respond to those court cases, then suddenly decide unilaterally that they will just withdraw when substantive and detailed information has been put together at a great deal of cost, as I've said, and submitted through the courts. So it makes you wonder, what was the motive behind that court action? Well, was it just pure politics? If it's pure politics, well then let's not abuse court processes, and more importantly, let's not abuse taxpayers' money. And certainly, let's not waste government's time that should be better directed and allocated to where it's needed the most. So that's what really we sought to communicate with this message. As I said, when these cases are instituted, the approach of government is to, respond in a manner that is appropriate, that not only recognizes the rights of applicants, but also recognizes the broader public that needs to be properly informed and that needs to understand what government is doing. So to then have parties, especially the UDM, which is represented in Parliament and has through Parliament access to all the information that it will require on how these issues are addressed, then run to the courts, create this massive cost exercise, and then just wake up one morning and decide, oh no, we're just going to walk away. Doesn't matter whose time and whose money has been wasted in the process. It's something that we find deeply disturbing and something that kind of deserves to be condemned, quite frankly. Shadi, do you have any questions on your WhatsApp? Let me just double check quickly. Okay. Clifford from Jacaranda FM has sent me a question asking if the president has expressed, I suppose meaning has expressed any view on the higher stages of load shedding and that government is on track to resolve load shedding. Yeah, as I said, Minister Ramaphosa is keeping the nation updated on the state of the grid, but more importantly on the implementation of the Energy Action Plan. These higher stages of load shedding are primarily, as we all know, caused by a large number of megawatts being taken off the grid as a result of unplanned breakages. That is something we know. Coupled with that is a significant chunk of megawatts that have been set aside for planned maintenance, which is aimed at long-term sustainability of the grid and electricity provision. So as the President said last week when he was being asked the question after a parliamentary session, we are taking short-term pain for long-term gain, in that Eskom cannot take its eye off the ball in terms of planned maintenance. That has to continue. Unfortunately, we do have to contend with these unplanned breakages, and in some cases with delays with respect to units that are meant to be back in service. So we remain confident that we're on track with respect to the implementation of the Energy Action Plan. We remain confident that this planned maintenance program will deliver the envisaged result and will contribute quite significantly in the stabilization of our grid. And we are attending to these unplanned breakages with the necessary speed that is required. Just trying to see if there's another question that I may have missed. I did address the G77 in Cuba, which Claire asked me about from AFP. No, I don't have any further questions on my WhatsApp. Shadi, don't have any further questions on your end. Everyone here looks satisfied and happy. Still wondering how comes Tembile drove all this way and has not asked a question. It's very un-Bloomberg-like. Okay, colleagues, that brings us to the end of this briefing. Thank you very much. Cheers, good to see you, my brother.